What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. We are back from up north. How you feeling, Rob, being back in the free country of America?
It's nice being back here. You don't realize how much we have until you have to see Canada. An entire country designed to look like Newark, New Jersey.
It's all right. Listen, Rob hasn't been to Canada that much, and where we went in St. Catharines is not necessarily representative of the full of Canada. Nice people out there, though. We did have a very nice time. We had a great time in Buffalo, great time in St. Catharines. It does when we go to Canada, it does feel like the audience that we draw to our show are the best people in Canada. I'll go a step further. It seems like the only good people in Canada come out to our show. So we support those people. We'll get them out of there before the massive bombing campaign that's inevitable.
I told a lot of Canada jokes that were doing very well. This one got nothing, but I still just think it's true of the country, is that every time I meet Canadians, they're very nice people. I don't understand how they seem to all come together to forge that socialist shithole. Like, there's something odd about when Canadians combine. It's like a bad Power Rangers or something.
I know what you mean. Well, there is something. I mean, there's got to be a connection. I don't have like a fully worked out thesis or anything on this, but there's got to be some connection between like the way socialism is sold and taking advantage of like people's kindness. Because it is always sold that way. It's always sold as like, but don't you just want to be a decent person? You know, I mean, come on. Like be good. I mean, I don't know, by the way, I don't know if you've seen this, Rob, and I haven't been like I don't pay very close attention to like local politics in general, even when I'm talking about like New York City. But I have kind of been paying attention a little bit to the New York City mayor race, just because Cuomo announced that he was running again, and that, you know, obviously for obvious reasons, right? Like he was such a major figure in the whole COVID insanity. But there's like I'm blanking on his name, but of the like progressive candidates, the guy who's leading is like a democratic socialist. And I saw he had like an ad for his candidacy for mayor, and it's all just like it's all, you know, it's like, hey, you know, you guys think it's expensive here, right? Why don't we just make it free? Why don't we say, hey, you know, we got all these slow buses. I say we make them faster and free. Daycare, that's one of the biggest costs. You know what? No cost for daycare. You're like, oh, all right. Like it really is like, it's wild to watch it where you're like, what a huge advantage it is just in terms of like selling to normies your policies when you get to just, I mean, look, I'm not saying like he act, but it's like when he just says it'll be no cost. The buses will be free. Childcare will be no cost. And if that's the world you're playing in, like if the game we're playing is that I get to pretend that I just have like a magic wand that can like poof make things free, and then you're just like, why wouldn't we do it? Oh, you're saying we shouldn't do it? It almost like, without saying this extra step, it's just kind of implied, but it's almost like going like, hey, Rob, you have a magic wand and you won't even wave it to make everything free. Like it on some level, it just plays on like, I'm a nice guy and you're like a bad, mean person who just doesn't care. Of course, that's, you know, I don't know. I guess it's a little frustrating because you're like, wouldn't almost every person like immediately go to the question of like, wait a minute, but we can do that? That's an option. We can just make things not cost anything.
I don't know about you, but I always thought the rent was too damn high.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that guy. Is that guy still around? Is he in the race?
I mean, he made it
bring down the rent.
A shockingly long amount of time, and then like people would it very weird with that guy. I don't know much about him, but he did it. Almost everyone knows who that guy is, I feel like. And like people like quote the line, like when you said it, it didn't take me a second to be like, wait, who are you talking? I mean, in any other context, if you were talking about like the guy who perennially came in 7th place in a mayor race, I would have no idea who you're talking about. With that guy, you're like, rent is too damn high.
They ain't gonna bring down your rent.
Branding for the win. What can I say? Jimmy Mc, what is it?
Jimmy
McMillan.
McMillan, 78 years
Jimmy
old.
McMillan. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's still out there, but this guy is also complaining about the rent being too damn high. Anyway, I always just found it, and this is true in general. It's not just with socialists. I mean, it's true with Democrats in general. To the extent that they borrow a little bit from socialism, but there is like an interesting thing, and um, it's such a like a comment on either the intelligence of the people who are pushing these policies or their perceived intelligence of the people of the voters who are listening to them push these policies. But the idea being like, look, if we're gonna, let's just say there's a thing that's got to get funded or whatever, for example, childcare, just because that was the comment in this ad that I saw. So like there could theoretically be an argument where you go like, okay, so there is this service that is childcare, and there's this one model where like people do it privately. Basically, the model is that you have to voluntarily come to an agreement with the person who's going to be charging you for is going to be providing you the childcare, right? So if someone wants to watch your kids, then you have to ask them how much do they charge. If they say they charge X, you can say, I can't do X, but I could do X minus 10. They go, I can't do X minus 10. I could do X minus 5. And you know what I mean? Like that's the model, like a free market in childcare. The other model is that we all, we, the government, force you at the threat of imprisonment to send us money. We then take that money, we hire the child care, and you don't have to pay for it at that point because you've already paid for it through us. Okay. Now, these are two different models, and you could have an argument about those models or which one you think is better. Now, when you just describe it the way it is, I will admit that the free market model already sounds more attractive because like already you're like, well, I don't know if I like the group with a monopoly on aggressive violence threatening to imprison me if I don't fund the thing. That seems like a worse model. But like, okay, those are the two models. I'm describing the way they actually work. But like, when isn't it just something like what a mind fuck it is that the people who support the forced monopoly model get to just describe it as free? You just get it. You know, there's stuff you want, you just get it. Is it like as if, I mean, I know this is like the most basic observation, but it's like I'm
So
still saying it because they're still making this claim that it's like, okay, if the people doing the childcare are getting paid at all, then it's not free. It's just a question of who's paying it and where is the funding coming from. No one gets to just say no cost unless we get to a point where you can like either through slavery. I mean, I guess there'd still be costs associated, right? Like that person still has to live and eat in order to show up for work the next day. But either you could enslave them and they just work for free, or you get into the realm of magic. Those are the only ways that things don't have a cost.
So we're saying the reason they have socialism in Canada is that despite them being kind and upbeat people, they're rather stupid.
I'm saying they're really, really friendly, dumb people.
Yeah, they're
That's what
gullible.
we've got up there in the
They're
north.
gullible but nice up in Canada. I guess that's what we learned from our 1 hour excursion over the border.
I like to consider us experts. We went a good 20 minutes deep into Canada. We went far enough into Canada where we could still like touch America. Like there's like we were still on base the whole time. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. Oh, and then I should mention that our next stop is Boston, which I'm very excited for. We just always me and you always have a lot of fun up in Boston, and we always draw great crowds up there. So that's one of the best comedy towns in the world. So very much looking forward to going up to Boston. That'll be on March 27th and 20 I'm sorry, March 27th through 29th. We'll be up at Laugh Boston. ComicDaveSmith.com for those tickets. Also, reminder, it's coming up sooner than later. In May, I will be back at the Soho Forum debating immigration in a live Oxford style debate in New York City. Make sure you come on out to that or go to one of the other Soho Forum debates because they're all excellent. TheSohoForum.org is the website for that.
And
Okay.
I got dates too.
Oh.
I'm
Go
doing
ahead, Rob.
a Libertarian Party state convention out in Iowa in April. I'm also doing a steamboat. If you want to come ski with me and do some skiing, you
Nice.
can also email me your porches at robsnewsroom@gmail.com. Put in all that shenanigans together. And then, of course, the Run Your Mouth podcast.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Go make sure to go see Rob there, and make sure to go check out Run Your Mouth. All right. So I got there's a couple things on my mind for today's show, and uh, I guess broadly speaking, like there's a couple things going on in foreign policy related that I thought were pretty newsworthy events, and then there's also just kind of one of the things domestically, I guess, that is perhaps the most interesting dynamic right now. I mean, or maybe it's number two behind the stuff Trump's doing, but it is really interesting watching the Democrats trying to grapple with the position that they're in. This is kind of the topic of discussion amongst almost every person who's either on left of center, liberal, leftist, everybody kind of in the left half of America. Whenever you see these days, if you see a show, whether it's like Bill Maher or the Pod Save America guys, or just anyone kind of nominally on the left, this is the talk. It's like, what do the Democrats have to do to come out of this? And it's appropriate. I mean, I've seen different times in my life now that I've been around for a little while. I've seen times where one party was up big and the other party was down and out. There's a few that come to mind. There was when Barack Obama first won, and won a pretty dominant victory, people were saying, well, the Republicans have really been defeated. At the time, George W. Bush was going out with the lowest approval ratings for an incumbent president. Dick Cheney had the lowest approval ratings for any vice president. Then here comes in this extremely popular Barack Obama, had some of the highest approval ratings in polling history in America. And now, okay, it seemed like that party had been pretty soundly defeated. When Donald Trump won the first time, people were saying the Democrats were down. It does seem to me that this is different in scale and kind than any other situation like that. I've never really lived through something quite like with one of the major two parties being as devastated as the Democrats are right now. As I've said before on the show, it's to lose your voter base and your propaganda apparatus all in one election is quite a loss. And they've also just lost a kind of cultural factor that's hard to put into words. But I guess to say it in the simplest terms, it's like they made the Republicans the cool kids and the Democrats kind of like the nagging Karens, which is really like it is for someone my age. I'm going to be 42 next month. For someone my age who was born in 1983, it's hard to overstate how impossible that would have seemed. Like the idea that the Republicans could ever be the cool ones amongst 17-year-olds or something like that just seems like that would have been like unthinkable. As like as unthinkable as like if you were like, okay, like if you had a bet with someone in like the 11th grade or something, and you were like, I got to turn someone into the coolest kid in school. And I was like, all right, you got to turn the principal into the coolest kid in school. And you'd be like, okay, well, that's impossible. That cannot be done. That was making the Republicans the cool guys is like on that level. So anyway, all of this is going on. And while this is happening, it's interesting to see everybody kind of give their own thoughts on what exactly it is that the Democrats could do. Some say you got to like go harder against Trump. Some people say you got to abandon the woke stuff. Some people say you got to get the working class vote again. And it's interesting, even though nobody seems to have an actual plan to put into action. And so anyway, this is kind of just one of the things that I've been thinking about. And while everyone is talking about this, you see like these different wings of the Democratic Party, and like what their vision for how you're supposed to do this is. This, I guess, is leading to some of the stuff that we're talking about now. In this kind of vacuum, it does seem like there's different Democrats who are kind of like starting to make some noise I still have not seen anything yet that I think has a chance of being successful. I don't know what you do, Rob. If you think there's one wing or another, or one strategy or another that could rise back to be successful, but I'm not seeing it.
I think it's unbelievable how poorly the Democrats are operating right now. The best messengers they have are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They're not doing a particularly good job. Then they had that incredibly cringe video with Cory Booker that they were all reading the exact same script and they're like trying to be edgy. But for all their thing of the dignity of the office, now like they're trying to figure out how to use curse words, but they don't know how to, they, like you said, they just don't know how to be cool. It doesn't fit their personalities. Also, the Democratic senators blocked the bill to keep women out of men out of female sports. I think the trans issue is such a loser for them. And their old guard, they're still trying to pitch Ukraine war to the end. And then when they're putting out social media videos, you got that lady who looks like a witch. She put out a weird video last week. They seem to be just at a total loss for how to. And by the way, the branding for them is easy. We're supposed to be the party of the people, and we're supposed to make sure that you guys have good jobs and great benefits. So we're going to go back to what we're doing. Except that they seem to be so in bed with the deep state and to be on that side that they can't not pitch wars. And I think as Elon Musk, we've said it before, has returned freedom to the internet. I don't think that they have the propaganda tools to just try and shame us into if you're not listening to us, you're not nice and you want to kill grandma.
You're exactly right, dude. And I think really the key is that you have to recognize that it's not the way the issue is put out is like, well, what can the Democrats do to get the voters back on their side? Or what can they do to get the working class back on their side or minorities back on their side or something like that? But you realize if that was just the case, then the Democrats would have been operating in a different manner for many years now. Like if the idea was getting enthusiasm and fundraising and votes and getting back, well, then they would have been embracing Bernie Sanders back in 2016. If the goal was to stay relevant and dynamic and win voters in this ever-changing culture, well, they had figures like Bobby Kennedy Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard or people like this. They ran all of them out. With the exception of Bernie Sanders. They attempted to run Bernie Sanders out. They just didn't realize that Bernie Sanders is such a pathetic, loyal dog that he was like, I'll just wait. That's cool. I'll just wait here in the yard and wait till you give me some scraps. I don't care, but the real key there is like at what you said about the deep state. The goal isn't how do we get everybody back? How do we become popular again? That's actually fairly straightforward. The goal is how do we maintain CIA control over this party and get the agenda of the CIA while winning people back? All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Tax Network USA. Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file an extension? The IRS may be ramping up enforcement. You could face wage garnishment, frozen bank accounts, even property seizures if you haven't taken action yet. But there is still hope, and that hope is Tax Network USA. They've helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt. They've filed over 10,000 tax returns. They specialize in helping people like you reduce their tax burdens, and they can help you too. Don't wait any longer. Visit them at tnusa.com/Smith or call them at 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you can save. Act now before the IRS takes more aggressive steps. Take control today. Visit tnusa.com/Smith or call them at 1-800-958-1000. All right, let's get back into the show. And look, I mean, that might sound a little kooky or whatever, but like, did you see, Rob, by the way, I don't know, we didn't talk about this on the show at all. Did you see who the Democrats had give their official response to the State of the Union speech?
I think it was Bernie Sanders.
No, Bernie Sanders gave one, but that wasn't their official one. No, Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders did it just like in the same way me or you could do it. Like he just made one and put it up. And yes, that was more, it's so funny because yes, you think of that as the response because yeah, like that's actually to some degree what would represent Democratic voters. But no, they had this chick, oh damn, I'm blanking on her name. but she was a CIA officer. She was literally a CIA employee. I mean, Rob, she's a former CIA employee, which is, doesn't really exist, by the way. If anyone that this is what a lot of CIA insiders have said too. There's no such thing as former CIA agent. No, but she goes and gives the speech. I'm trying to hold on. Well, I'll find her name here. Where was it? Yeah, it's the official Democratic response. It's she's
Melissa
from Michigan.
Slotkin.
Yes, she's a
It's courtesy
senator
of
from.
Mike in the chat. I didn't just pull that
Thank
up.
you. Thank you. So she's a senator in Michigan. Now, you could say, she won her Senate seat, I think, by a very thin margin, but it was in a state that Trump won. So I guess that, that at least says like, well, she must have. Typically, I'm not saying
Is
this
she the one that
necessarily.
put out the cool ad of "Look, I can drive backwards. I learned all sorts of cool shit."
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't think I saw that. But it typically the kind of the traditional wisdom would be that if you on a presidential election day where one candidate wins, if you're from the other party and you won, that would indicate that you must have carried some of their votes because that's who came to show up. So like if Donald Trump wins, 52% of the vote or whatever, well, that means 52% of the people coming out there voted for Donald Trump. If you won, you must have at least won some of his votes. Now, that's not technically necessarily true because people could not vote for president and just vote for their senator, but it's generally probably true. But the woman literally worked for the CIA and she comes out and it gave like a Cold War speech. Literally in the speech, she goes, Donald Trump is cozying up to Vladimir Putin. Ronald Reagan was president when we won the Cold War. If Donald Trump was president back then, we probably would have lost the Cold War. So like that is the CIA's conception of how to win back Democratic voters is to go, we're Reaganites now. Like it's just as if that's where the Democrats, the voters are at. But so that's it. Just to your point, this is literally what they're attempting to do. Well, let's put our CIA woman out there. Maybe she'll win him back over. And it shows you that it's not, again, in the same sense that it's not like, hey, how could MSNBC get higher ratings? How could CNN get higher ratings? Well, we all know lots of things they could do to get higher ratings. That's not really their issue. Their issue is how do we keep pushing this agenda and get higher ratings? Now that's much trickier because the agenda has been rejected. But like we've said before, like there's a million ways that you could figure out how to get the number one show in cable news if you were unencumbered by what topics you're allowed to talk about. I mean, come on. Here, I got a new show for you, MSNBC. It's called The Epstein Files. And every single day, this show is dedicated to one news story and one news story only. And that is getting to the bottom of the Epstein story. There was a pedophile ring that was, with American girls being molested and systematically abused. And this involves so many of the most powerful people in our media, in our culture. This guy Epstein had ties to some country in the Middle East, as Dan Bongino would say. We have no idea which one. Okay, do that. We're going to interview victims. We're going to get all the people who were around him and grill them. We're going to put all the best reporting together. And every night we're going to give you more information about the Jeffrey Epstein case. You telling me there's a chance that wouldn't be the number one rated show at MSNBC? Do you think, like the video clips would be getting fucking 20 million hits online every single day. Everyone would be driven to it. Okay, they could do that, but why can't they do that? Because they're not just in it for the ratings. That would defeat their entire purpose. They're there to prop up the regime and, through like the deep state or what, that's what they're there to do. So they can't go after. So anyway, what's really interesting about the Democratic situation is that like there will be occasionally you will see some people like real left wingers who will kind of point stuff like this out. They'd be like, we could be opposed to the military industrial complex. That's very popular, And they're like, yeah, but the whole point is we're trying to figure out how we can support the military industrial complex. So that one doesn't exactly work. Anyway, in this absurd vacuum, some of the more colorful figures in the Democratic Party have been out there kind of giving a lesson on, in my opinion, what not to do. But we've got a few of those today. Let's start with let's do the Elon Omar one first. Rob, I think you haven't seen this yet, but I did find this to be just pretty damn entertaining.
We recently had one of your Republican colleagues, Brandon Gill, on the show. He said that America would be better off if you were arrested and deported. He also said that there was audio of you advising what he said are illegal immigrants here from Somalia on how to evade ICE detection. I want you to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are people who have really stopped caring about our institutions, really stopped caring about our Constitution. We know that folks who are here, whether they are documented or undocumented, we know whether you are a permanent resident or you're a citizen, you have constitutional rights. And it is really important for people to know those rights. I know that it is red meat for his base that are xenophobic and racist to say to them that I am going to find a way to arrest and deport a member of Congress who he thinks is doing something wrong when I am doing the right thing in trying to make sure everybody that is within my constituency has the resources and the information that they need.
And she was democratically elected by members by the people in her district.
Yes, of course. But just to follow up very quickly, just be clear, you're not calling all of his base xenophobic and racist, right?
Well, I mean, he is feeding to something. He has a petition out. He's getting donations. That's what this is all about. He knows he can't deport me. There is no grounds for my arrest. So this information is only being put out there by him for a reason. And that reason is because he has a base that feeds off of that.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, thanks so much for coming in.
No, I appreciate you all for having me.
Thank you very much.
Is there something, Rob, that's it, we're done with the video, but isn't there something amazing? I know I like to point this out all the time because I do think it's like a subtle thing that sometimes people don't even notice. But it's now, again, of course, most people do, or they at least like know it on some level. But when I say they don't notice, they may not notice the tactic. They notice overall that CNN is completely like corrupt and on one side of the issue. But like, you know how we've talked about this a lot before, whenever they're like if they're interviewing Donald Trump, they'll or JD Vance or someone like that, they'll do this thing where like you say something, I ask you your opinion, you give the answer to the question, and then before I start the next question, I just go, we already know that that's not true. Moving on. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't even give you a chance to get back. They're just like, I'll be. But then what does Wolf Blitzer do when he's got Ilhan Omar here? She just says her piece, and then he's supposed to be playing neutral journalist, but then he just turns over and goes, and she was elected by her constituents, as if that ever needs to be pointed out about a congressperson. Like, yes, that isn't that the default assumption of anybody who's in is a member of Congress, that they won an election to get there? But yet he just turns over to go, she got votes, saying that, like, what? Anyway, that's just interesting. But here's a strategy that maybe the Democrats could pursue. How about this? Anybody who objects to her, in her words, giving resources to illegal immigrants so that they can evade ICE must be a racist. There's one strategy. It's like, what? By the way, as I've gone through the polls, before, it was a 50-50 issue amongst Democratic voters whether they support mass deportations. Super majorities of the American people support it. So she's talking about 50% of Democratic voters, like 50% of the people, of the minority of the American voters who even still voted Kamala Harris. 50% of them, I guess, are xenophobic racists, according to Ilhan Omar. So, like, just saying, of all the strategies, this one doesn't seem to be the best. But maybe I'm missing something, Rob. What do you think? Maybe I'm just racist.
I don't think you're missing much. And it's incredible how poorly she speaks the English language for being a Congress lady. And she's not from Jamaica. She's almost talking like and dressed like a Jamaican lady. That gets a little bit confusing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think lecturing to individuals who don't like everyone pouring over the border and wanting to control who's in the country and screaming at them that they're racist is a very good way of marketing this.
Well, isn't it wild too that it's like if if you are making this argument and like I'm doing a debate on immigration at the Soho Forum, as I mentioned, coming up soon, and maybe some of this stuff will come up there. But it does seem to me that unless you're arguing for open borders, like unless you're taking a pure like a pure position of there should be absolutely zero restrictions on anyone in the world if they want to come here. If you're not, which is, look, there are some people who take that position. I, you know, vehemently disagree with it. It is wildly unpopular. I don't know, again, like I haven't seen I've tried to find numbers on like what percentage of the American people support open borders. And the truth is that it is so unpopular that no one even ever asks the question. And I look at all these immigration polls and it's very hard. I found one ever that I think it got like 4%. And this was from many years ago. The truth, they never even asked that question. They asked, like, would you like higher levels of immigration or lower levels of immigration? Do you support mass deportations or only deportations of violent criminals? Do you like, these are the questions asked. Because at this point, when super majorities, support mass deportations, I really doubt you could get 2% of people to say that they support zero restrictions. But if you want to make that argument, whether people support it or not, you could make the argument. Again, I don't agree with it, but you could make the argument. But short of that, short of arguing that there should be zero restrictions, I don't see how you get to go on your moral high horse here of like, you're a racist, xenophobic if you think that people who came here illegally should be forced to leave. It's like, well, then that's the whole thing. It's like, if you believe in any immigration restrictions, well, then obviously at some point you got to restrict people, right? Even if you were to say that, Americans, we take in more immigrants than anywhere in the world, both legally and illegally, but I think we should take in a lot more, like whatever the exact numbers were under Joe Biden, we're taking in like 1 million legal immigrants a year. And then they were having hundreds of thousands, to millions pour in every month. We don't exactly know the numbers, but let's just say you were like, I think the number should be way higher. I think we should take in 10 million immigrants legally every year. It's like, okay, well then those 10 million come. And what happens when more come on top of that? I mean, unless you're just for open borders, you'd have to believe in restrictions at some point. Okay, then they have to be restricted. But then to turn around and say that makes you racist or xenophobic or something, it's like, is your argument that if anybody in America does not believe that anyone in the world has a right to come here, whether they follow our laws or don't, and if you don't believe that, you're a bad person somehow? Again, the reason I just mentioned this is just because it's like you see these Democrats struggling to figure out how to deal with this moment. And then it's almost like at least one of them, not that she's a representative of all of the Democratic establishment, she's certainly not, but you have one of them out here who's like, hey, here's my idea. Let's lean into this very popular policy and say that you are an evil person if you support it. And it's just wild to think that anyone would even, like anyone in the game of politics would think that this is something you could say out loud. But of course, when you do that, you can count on Wolf Blitzer to nod along and remind everybody that you were elected.
Also, when she says that illegal immigrants have constitutional rights, I don't think it's a constitutional right to not be deported. They might have constitutional rights of not being like just illegally held in prisons indefinitely.
Sure. Yeah, no, look, well, right. Yeah, it's like, it's not, yeah, you can't torture them or beat them over the head with a club. Sure. Like they still do have like human rights, but they do not, the whole point is they do not have the right to be here. And that's a very different thing. That's a very different claim. Yes, it's true, right? And I'm sure all of us, I know for a fact, me and you support this, right? But it's true that anybody, and the Constitution is clear about this, that anybody who's here, any US persons, any person who is in the United States of America has rights. Meaning, like, if they were charged with murder tomorrow, okay, well, they get a lawyer and they get a day in court and they get to put up a defense and call witnesses and face their accuser and all of those things. You know what I mean? Well, face your accuser and murder. You understand what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, like, they have basic human rights. Sure. Like we can't just give them the electric chair or throw them in jail for life without a trial because they're not US citizens. Sure, they have rights. But that isn't the question. The question is, do they have the right to be here? Do we have the right to say, hey, you came in here illegally, you have to leave and get back in line if you want to come in here? And how should we feel about a sitting member of Congress who is going out of her way to like obstruct the law and the new administration implementing this legal and very popular policy? That's the question that's relevant. Again, they don't want to answer that. And forget, look, CNN seems happy to go down with the ship too. The other Democrat who is seemingly kind of emerged is this. I'm blanking on her name, but here let's play the next clip that we have here. Do you have the next one, Mike? There we go.
It is not a criminal violation to enter the country illegally. It's not a criminal. It's a crime. It's not a crime, which is why they're so frustrated, because they really want our local law enforcement to go out and round up people when they could be looking out for the murderers and the sexual abusers as well as the robbers. They want them to go and round people up on civil accusations. And so that it is not a criminal violation to enter legally.
All right. So this is all right, let's stop that one. So this is the other angle that I guess they could go with, that it's not we should only be deporting the criminals and we shouldn't be rounding up other people. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
No, I think this is worse than that, because she's saying it's not a crime for them to have entered illegally. That's not true. It is a crime.
Yeah, that's
for them
just
to enter
false.
illegally. Now, if you want to make the argument of, hey, I'd rather use our law enforcement for policing crime than wasting it on immigrants that have come in illegally but have otherwise been peaceful and are actually an asset to our community, you can make that argument. And yeah, you could say, hey, why are we wasting federal resources on people that, even though they came here illegally, are actually making a meaningful contribution? You can go argue that. And that might even be what she's trying to say. But instead, she's just lying and is mistaken when she says that when they came into the country illegally, they didn't commit a crime. That's not English. What does that mean? How do you come into the country illegally without committing a crime? That seems to be
illegally crossing the border is a crime. Yes. But right, to your point, I mean, look, like, first of all, I don't even disagree necessarily with like, look, there really should be an order of operations if you're talking about deportations. And as I've always said, the first most important thing was stemming the flow of illegal migrants coming to this country, which Donald Trump seems to actually be correct in what he said about his State of the Union, which is, turns out, just meaning business about it pretty much takes care of that. I personally have been shocked at like the fact that there are record low illegal border crossings. It's really amazing how much of that is a result of just who's sitting in the Oval Office and what does their messaging sound like, which, I guess kind of makes sense in hindsight, but that it's like, it's quite a journey to go on, and people aren't going to do it if they think they're just going to get turned away when they get there. And so when Joe Biden's in, you have record high illegal crossings. When Trump's in now, you have record low. Pretty incredible juxtaposition there. But if you want to argue like, hey, we should go after the violent criminals first, I don't think you're going to get much of an argument out of me and you on that. But the thing is, like, again, this almost, it becomes more of like a philosophical conversation when you're just saying like, okay, fine. But then but listen, do the people who illegally came into our country, do they have the right to not be kicked out? And I don't really see a compelling argument that they don't. Or like that, it's like, no, you don't. Like, look, there are places you don't have a right to be. And like in a libertarian sense, this is like essentially in pure libertarian theory, right? You'd be like, okay, there are basically two types of people, or maybe you could say three types of people who enter property. Okay. There are the people who own that property, and they can enter it anytime they want to. Then there are the people who are invited onto that property, and they can enter it as at the owner of the property's discretion. And then there are people who are not invited onto that property who enter it anyway. And that is known as trespassing. And trespassers can be removed at the owner's discretion. And so, like, I just don't understand exactly why that theory doesn't scale. You know, like why that shouldn't ultimately scale up to a nation. And that if there are people who were not invited by the domestic population who came in against the rules, why is it exactly that they just cannot be removed? It's an interesting, when you really think about it, Rob, obviously without just getting the detail of like the criminality of illegal border crossing wrong, really what the implication from this view is that if you ever make it here, no matter how you made it, this should be home base. You should be safe, like in a game of freeze tag. I'm, can't get me now. I'm on base. And that is just nutty. It makes absolutely no sense. And it is so distant from where the American people are on this issue at the moment.
Yeah, it just seems like the failure of the Democratic branding across the board. Like I said, just last week, they're defending still trans people in female sports. And here you have another issue that the American population would like to get cleaned up. And nope, they're still willing to defend that we need to have humanity. And so therefore, all of these illegal immigrants should be allowed to stay. And also, we need to have compassion on Ukraine. And we need to continue to support that war so that more of their people can die. And by the way, they got low-hanging fruit of just go challenge Donald Trump on the tariffs and that we got a weak economy and he's going to cause a recession for all of the people that are looking to have things be cheaper. You got some winning cards. Go play those.
Yeah. Well, I think, honestly, the Democrats are in a situation now where it's in order for them to actually play cards that are going to win. They kind of, and this is what it's the kind of the nature of these things. They actually need Trump to make a mistake, and a really big one. Like they kind of can't, it's like that's a challenge in politics. I understand, but they've boy who cried wolfed themselves into a corner. They can't can't pretend that something is a huge outrage if it isn't, because they've just like that card has been played. And even if Donald Trump does say something that's fairly outrageous, they can't make a big outrage of it because it's like, you do that with everything he says, so it doesn't matter. You have no you have no currency in this exchange anymore. You're going to have to wait for him to really fuck up. You're going to have to hope that he really blows it. And so maybe your strategy could be to try to lure him into making a really bad decision and then exploit that. But that seems to me to be their hope, that he really fucks up, and then they can be like, oh shit, this is a goddamn disaster, and we wipe our hands of it because we were against it or something like that. But I just don't think like they can hope that if Trump proceeds with mass deportations, the implementation of that is really ugly and brutal, and people are like, shit, I just can't support this. And then they could maybe, but to just try to get ahead of the issue when Donald Trump, because again, leaving aside like all the aspects of politics and how Trump actually governed compared to how his rhetoric is, the bottom line is that in the perception of the American people, and somewhat fairly, Donald Trump was saying he wanted to build a wall back in 2016. Donald Trump was saying these people shouldn't be let in back then. And now you're going to bitch and moan that after we let all those people in, that some of them are getting kicked out. But Donald Trump's position was none of them should have been here to begin with. And so he can almost play in this way that, like, yeah, it is unfortunate. The borders are, what's his name? I'm
Tom
blanking on his
Harmon or something.
Harmon, yeah, Harmon, Tom, whatever. Even he said, even the most tough talking immigration hawk in the nation he said at one point, he goes, yeah, it's tragic that we have to do this. He goes, it's a tragic. This is why it's so bad when you don't have a border. Like, this is why it's so bad when you let people flood in illegally by the millions, because now we got to round people up and kick them out. And I got to say that, to me, when I heard him say that, I go, that is a winning kind of compelling message, you know, that it's like, yeah, that's right. We quite literally in this case have to clean up the policies of the previous administration. And it sure does suck that falls on us to have to do. There's something about that I thought was like, that's kind of hard to argue with, because otherwise, if you don't accept that, then no matter how much you're against the illegal immigration, or you could say you're against it, your position is that once it happens, we just have to accept it. Once it happens, it's like, okay, the demographic makeup of our nation has been changed by the last administration, and we cannot change that. We have to accept that going forward. And that's going to be a tough sell. That's going to be a very tough thing to convince anyone of, because it'd just be like, well, no, we don't. I mean, we have the legal tools to deal with this. So why is it that you're just asserting it's incumbent amongst us to just accept that now? And that just doesn't make sense to me. In the same way that it never made sense to me that if there is a giant caravan of people coming from South America that are just uninvited people that are not coming in through the legal process of our immigration system, but they're just coming here, why is it that America has to accept them? That just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, it's not, it's like, what under what obligation is the principle that America belongs to everybody in the world equally? Because if that's your principle, and yet only American citizens can vote in elections for the most part, it seems that you're going to lose elections to anybody who says, I think America belongs to the American people, not the world equally, which is, by the way, essentially the core of Trump's message since 2016. And it's the reason why he's been president twice. He's won 2 out of 3 elections, 3 out of 3 if you ask Trump. I'm not sure I'm with him on that. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Stash. Brand new sponsor. We're thrilled to have them on board. Saving and investing can feel impossible, but with Stash, it's not just a reality, it's easy. Stash isn't just an investing app. It's a registered investment advisor that combines automated investing with dependable financial strategies to help you reach your goals faster. They'll provide you with personalized advice on what to invest in based on your goals. And if you want to just sit back and watch your money go to work, you can opt into their award-winning expert-managed portfolio that picks stocks for you. Stash has helped millions of Americans reach their financial goals and starts at just $3 a month. Don't let your savings sit around. Make it work harder for you. Go to get.stash.com/problem to see how you can receive $25 toward your first stock purchase and to view important disclosures. That's get.stash.com/problem. Paid non-client endorsement, not representative of all clients and not a guarantee. Investment advisory services offered by Stash Investment LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk. Offer is subject to terms and conditions. All right, guys, let's get back into the show. All right, we got one more video here. You want to play that one? All right, Rob. Well, I started the show saying that Democrats are searching for their way to get out of this hole, and I think they found it. So there we go. That's good. That's going to turn people around, right? Jesus Christ.
I think not only are they floundering on all the policies, they don't have a good salesperson for it. And whatever marketing companies they're overspending money with, as you saw with Kamala Harris, I think she ended up her camp. She spent the most money ever and then still ended up in debt. And in part because they spent a shit ton of money on television advertising. Who was even watching that? And so whoever behind the scenes is going, oh, well, this will be fun. This is how we get the kids back on our side. It's with these goofy TikTok videos because they're looking at Trump, and Trump just has that cool factor that they tried to whine him out of office with the dignity, as if jumping in front of a camera like I don't know, a fourth grader could come up with something more creative than that, and probably did on a school project for TikTok. They're just floundering. They're just trying to figure out, how do we sell our message? And apparently being the adults in the room includes jumping around and putting what is that, a Tekken Tag song? I don't even know, but it's terrible.
Yeah, it's also like, isn't it funny? Because look, 2016
Smash
to
Bros. Mike Suarez is a bigger nerd than us.
Suarez got, you really should have waited like at least 30 seconds so it seemed like you Googled that. There's something funny because like, okay, it's 8 years, a little over 8 years since Donald Trump won his first presidential election in 2016. And okay, 8 years, especially in our current political environment, is a fairly long period of time, you know, in the 24-hour news cycle or whatever. And a lot of stuff's happened since then. But it's kind of wild when you zoom out that so much of the criticism of Donald Trump when he first came on the scene was that he lacks decorum. He's not serious. This is kind of immature. This isn't presidential. This isn't how important people are supposed to speak. And then it's like, you just get so quickly to a point where it's like, well, what are you guys doing? Like, it seems like it's like an imitation of what 20-year-olds do on TikTok or something like that. Like, this is and it's also on top of that, just so unappealing. This kind of like serious women in pantsuits doing cringy fucking like, what world are you living in? Like, it's amazing that somehow the Democrats managed to hand Donald Trump the adult in the room persona. You know what I mean? Like, somehow he actually does. And this was the case. It was one of the things that was so startling about this last election, was that Donald Trump, when compared to senile Joe Biden or cackling Kamala Harris, seemed like the serious alternative. Like, at least this guy is here and he means business, and he's got a little bit of an agenda, and he's got some thoughts of his own. And it's not just whatever some big corporate donor told them to say or whatever the popular thing at the moment is. Like, he's got some ideas. And that just seems more serious than anything that the Democrats are putting up against him. But my God, it's hard. It's genuinely hard to even put into words how unappealing that video is. There's just like a disgust impulse that comes from watching that you're like, what the fuck are you ladies doing? Like, what drugs are you on that you thought this might resonate with anyone? It seems like something that you'd like your like adult children would be like digging through their parents' stuff and find a video from college when they did something like that, and you go like, the whole family laughs at it and they're like, yeah, it's pretty embarrassing in hindsight, but we were 20, you know, and it seemed cool at the time. They're sitting members of Congress are doing this. I don't know, Rob. I don't think it's going to work.
I can't quite peg what experience this was or what this archetype is, but I remember, I'm going to call them the pedophile moms that instead of working jobs, like to hang out at the school for the school plays or the school pictures. And even as like a third grader, they'd come up with some idea and you'd be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's terrible. That's what this video feels like.
Yes, that is a very good way to put it.
Yeah, the worst idea from the theater kid mom that did not go that route and is now, you know, doesn't work and shows up to the school to volunteer for these things and just has the worst idea so she can have her one moment in the director chair with 3 third graders. But even those kids are smart enough to be like, oh, this lady sucks. I don't want to do that.
It's like the thing like when you're a third grader and you have no real power, but it's like the thing that one of the like moms would suggest where you'd be like, I will run away. Listen, I will run away. Like, if you make me do this, I swear I will run away. I will go on hunger strike. I will run away and I will never go to school again. I cannot be seen doing this. And they're like, no, come on, it's cute. And you're like, you don't get it. You don't get it. I cannot be seen doing this. Like, it's genuinely that. That's where the Democrats are at. Look, like the interesting thing here, right, is that in order for the Democrats to survive, in order for them to have political success in the future. And this is barring, it's hard to predict the future. And the truth is that Donald Trump is not going to run again, as scared as the Democrats are. This is his last term. There is nobody in line who has what Donald Trump has. Now, we'll see what happens over the next few years. J.D. Vance has obviously risen tremendously in prominence. He is the sitting vice president now, and he's doing a good job in moments like the moment with Zelensky and moments like with Dana Bash, where he's like showing that he can I can go to war with the people who you think of as the other side. And so, but he's not Donald Trump. He has never demonstrated that he has a cult of personality following the way Donald Trump does. He's never demonstrated that he has tens of millions of people who will go to war for him the way Donald Trump has. Okay, so there's that. So someone else has to rise up on the Republican side as well. But it seems to me that almost what the Democrats need is to some degree their own version of Trump. And what I mean by that is not that they have to be anything like Donald Trump. In fact, that is the complete wrong mentality. I think that's the mentality that a lot of Democrats are almost like going with here. Well, we got to find someone like that. It's like the day after the election, they go, we need our own Joe Rogan. We need our own Donald Trump. That's not how it works. Joe Rogan didn't become Joe Rogan by trying to be anyone else's thing. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like he was going, hey, we need the podcast version of Dan Rather's. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not how these things happen. And in fact, like one of the things I was thinking of earlier is something you said that just reminded me of that. But do you remember the when Elizabeth Warren was doing that video in her living room and she's drinking the beer, but she drinks it in such a weird way that you can tell she does not usually have a bottle of beer, but like she's trying to do the and it's like that's the
humor with the hamburgers when it was clear that he eats lizard food and he's never cooked a burger in his whole life. Hey, look, I'm a human just enjoying Memorial Day like the rest of you, because
it was a funny thing.
Burgers with the grill that's off.
Well, it's that it's not just that the grill was off, but it's that there was cheese over the raw patties, and you're like, no one who's ever made a burger ever put a slice of cheese over a raw patty. Like, that's just not how it's done. It's a little intricacy, I guess. If you've never made a burger, it might take you a minute to be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But like, that's just not how it, and so there's but the whole thing is that it's like their mentality is so off because they're so phony. So they're like, even Elizabeth Warren drinking the beer, right? She's like, hey, well, I'm trying to talk to like workers. And you know what workers like is to have a cold beer after work. And that is true, right? Like, it is true that beer is popular amongst the working class. But look, Donald Trump just carried the working class vote, and he's never had a beer. And in fact, he'll openly say, I've never had a drink in my life. That is not most Americans' experience, but it really is Donald Trump's experience. And so when he says that, it just comes off as authentic. It's like, yeah, dude, my older brother who I looked up to killed himself with alcohol. And I was just like, I'm never going to drink alcohol. And then all of a sudden, you're not just like trying to do the thing that is what they do, but and then it's kind of like, oh shit, that's an interesting part of Donald Trump. Now, it doesn't mean that working class guy who enjoys a cold beer after work is going to stop having a beer. But it was completely unnecessary for that. So anyway, the point is just that what they would need on the Democratic side is somebody who was outside of the CIA deep state system who could work up enough popular support that they just take the party the way Donald Trump did, And so essentially, I'm saying there's no way for them to achieve what they want to achieve, which is maintain deep state control and work up popular support. It's going to have to come from someone outside of that who takes that away from them, in which case the Democrats could come back tomorrow. That's the truth. Most people at this point, they're not partisans. They don't really care which party it's coming from. They just kind of want to see results, and they want to hear something that sounds real to them. Okay, I do have to wrap up on that. We didn't do the foreign policy stuff, so we'll definitely tackle that first thing on tomorrow's episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Catch you next time. Peace.